So one of the things that was a big initiative at Outreach when you worked there was 30% of our pipeline we're going to self-source. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and kind of how you contributed to that and how you think about self-sourcing your pipeline as an account executive?
Yeah, 100%. I've been blessed enough to be in roles where prospecting never went away. So like I had to keep doing it. It was just a thing. And
Yeah.
so, and because I was successful as an SDR, it was always been my strongest skill. And so that's why I love talking about it. And so thanks for bringing it up. But yeah, at Outreach, we had this initiative where, in order to scale, you have to start having some pipeline coming from AEs. And so we had to develop a way to make AEs want to prospect, but also make it sustainable because we're all very busy. And so we developed this method called 2100s. I'm not responsible for it. One of my old VPs comes from Salesforce, was responsible for it. And he basically said, every week you select 2 new accounts and you sequence 10 new people total. And at the end of the week, you have 0 overdue tasks. So 2 new accounts, 10 people, 0 overdue tasks at the end of the week. And I took that to a different, I took that in stride and made it my own, where I started focusing on 5 accounts per week because I had the bandwidth to do so. 2, the 2100 was just a North Star to hold us accountable. So I think number 1 is you have to have a set goal as a framework to hold yourself accountable. And then you need to break down every single day, how are you going to execute the controllable inputs? And so my time blocking is very niche. So I took the 2100s and turned into like, okay, how am I going to operationalize this for me? And so like I niched down my time blocking. And so I would say on, Tuesday from 9 to 10, that's when I'm going to literally go in and put people in a sequence and outreach. And then from 11 to 10, I'm going to execute my call tasks. So there are very specific very specific blocks of tasks. And so what that allowed me to do is 2 things. Not every day looked the same. And so at the end of a Monday, I would look at my calendar on Tuesday and I would say, okay, these are the meetings I have. Here are going to be my prospecting blocks around those calls. And so I didn't make an excuse that I have all these calls. I found the time, the white space of my calendar. And then I had to practice discipline to actually execute on those tasks every week or every day. And ultimately what ends up happening is if you focus on the controllable inputs every day, if you actually make your calls during the call block, and if you actually sequence 5 new people a day or whatever your North Star metric is that's controllable, the results will end up taking care of themselves. And so by following that framework and that system, the meetings started to roll in is because I was focusing on the things that were in my control. And so, I would select 5 new accounts per week. I would use, Sales Nav to find the people that I was going to sequence. I then developed very specific, relevant persona messaging that I would deliver to them. I was using a lot of touches early on in my sequences. So I would do like 3 touches on day 1, 3 touches on day 3. But because I was using different channels on those touches and there was relevant messaging, it decreased the time it took for me to get a response because I was doing it earlier in the sequence. So that's kind of a little bit about kind of the initiative, how I operationalized it, and then how I actually went and executed it. But the net here is for AEs listening, there's no excuse not to prospect. You have to, you can't rely only on your SDR. You have to own your pipeline. And the way to do that is to get very specific on your goals, not only for the week, the month, the quarter, but daily micro actions that will get you to those end goals. And so, I was able to generate like over $1 million in pipeline as I was ramping, and that led to 5 new logos closed in the year, all because I focused on the daily actions and owned my pipeline gen.
So we connected, of course, I've just been seeing a lot of your kind. I can't remember if I reached out to you or if you reached out to me or what it was, but it's one of those situations I run into a lot on the podcast where I've been seeing someone's stuff online for a while, but just never connected with them. So
Yeah.
it's good to be connected, man.
Yeah, really a pleasure to be here. Very grateful. I think I reached out to you about one of
Okay.
your posts, and I was like, "Hey, on this personal branding journey that I've been on, I'm trying to get on as many podcasts as possible. Yours is one that I love to listen to.
Yeah.
It's a good indicator that I'm on the right path to be able to be here with you. So I'm really pumped up, man.
Well, yeah. Well, we're super privileged to have you. While on the topic of personal branding, that's something I want to talk to you about because you started out, it looks like, as a BDR in
Yep.
2015. So you're about 7, 8 years into your sales journey here. It's a good amount of time. When did you start thinking about your personal brand?
Honestly, I didn't start thinking about actually executing on my personal brand until November of 2021. But it's something that I always wanted to do, right? You see folks like
Yeah.
yourself and others who creating great content online. And I wanted to be in that position where I could give back. I just was always on the sidelines, right? I was, I guess, having imposter syndrome for a while of, is anyone going to care about what I have to say? And then finally in
Yeah.
November, I kind of took the leap and just started posting and documenting kind of my journey and haven't looked back since.
I'm kind of jealous, dude. All the engagement that you get on your post for doing this for less than a year, dude. I would have guessed you've been doing this for a couple of years.
I know it's interesting. I think I've been really lucky to connect with folks that have big followings that
Yeah.
I've built relationships with that have helped me out along the way, and going on these podcasts definitely helps as well, just to get my name out there. But I think the goal has always been the same of just trying to help people based on like my own journey.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. You do a great job of that. From BDR to account executive, if we talk about that piece, if I'm looking at your LinkedIn correctly here, you were BDR for all of 3 months, it looks like, and got the promotion pretty quickly. What's the backstory there?
Yeah, so I graduated college, and a friend told me about this fintech startup in San Francisco, but it
Mm.
wasn't really SaaS. It was more so mortgage lending, and so it was a coin to BDR, coin to AE because we were trying to be this SaaS company. I worked there for about 3 years, and I was making lots of cold calls. I was working with a lot of clients, getting yelled at. So I built a lot of sales and business acumen of how to
Uh-huh.
navigate tough situations, how to build that, again, thick skin, how to outbound to connect with people and overcome objections. And after those 3 years, realized that I wanted to get into a SaaS role. Like, it was always this thing of mine while living in San Francisco, friends working in
Mhm.
SaaS as AEs. I was like, I want to be an AE in SaaS. And so even though I had a AE title and I probably could have BS'd my way to an AE role like SMB, I wanted to do it the right way. And so I took a step back
Yeah.
and actually became an SDR at Demand Base, where I took everything I learned, applied it to being an SDR in SaaS, and then was able to accelerate my way over 9 months to that North Star goal of becoming a true AE at a true SaaS company. So that's kind of the backstory there. For the first 3 years of my career, it was really a grind and that typical hustle culture,
Mhm.
but it really did help me in my next phase of my career, which was transitioning into like that true SaaS role.
Yeah. So your friend that told you about, getting into sales essentially. So did you get into sales by accident? Was that not something
Yeah.
that you really intended to do and this just sounded like a fun thing to to do and you need some
Yeah.
money or what?
Yeah, I think folks
Yeah.
listening can definitely relate. I had no idea
Yep.
what I really wanted to do. The plan was I went to school in
Yeah.
Arizona. I was going to move back to New York, try to do some commercial real estate because that's what I went to school for. I never was the smartest on paper in school, not because I don't have the intelligence, it's because I never applied myself. It was never my thing. I
Yeah.
knew I was never going to sit behind a desk and crunch numbers. And so something my dad told me from when I was in middle school, he's like, you got this street smart, this this natural curiosity, this, these intangibles that I think would do really well in sales. He was an old VP of sales. He now runs his own company. And so when I was approached with this opportunity, I was like, let me give it a shot. And it ended up being a role where my strengths as an individual really helped me. The intangibles, the unteachables, the figure it out factor, if you will, really did help me in my career. So got into sales because I just wanted to take a shot and see what it was all about. And yeah, never looked back.
So what were some of the things that didn't come so naturally to you at the beginning?
Yeah, I think feedback. I had been a stubborn person early in my 20s, and I think that happens as before you mature as an individual and understand what real life is about. But getting feedback, realizing that I couldn't just come in at 9 o'clock and leave at 5 in the beginning, right? Like I had to make a name for myself early on to show that I was serious about it, and I figured if I really put all my effort into it, I would get the opportunities when they would arise from others. And that actually really helped me throughout my career of like building that internal brand of this is the guy we can count on. But I think getting feedback was really tough. Organizing like my day was really tough because I didn't learn what time management was. I didn't know how to structure my day. And, I kind of winged it every day until I figured out a process on my own. I think cold calling was really tough in the beginning because I didn't have any training. I didn't have any training on it, right? I was cold calling these mortgage brokers who had been in the business for 20 years. They're like, who the hell is this kid calling me? They're giving me an objection. And I'm like, I had no idea what to say. So it was one of those things where it was scary at first. And I would get that nervous energy of like, maybe I'll just like fake my way through the calls. But then I started to figure out if I practice more and more, I'll get better at it. And, sooner rather than later, I started getting my reps in and the objections became easier to deal with. And I started having meaningful conversations and it just, getting thrown into the deep end when there was only 70 employees, not really any training. I had to figure a lot of things out on my own. So I was like watching YouTube videos. I was reading all those like old school HubSpot articles and how do you overcome objections? What's the best way to handle a cold call? So that was the toughest piece for me in the beginning, those three things.
It's weird to me that there aren't a lot of other jobs like sales that are this demanding of a person skill-wise that have so little training on average. I think in tech, we live in a little bit of a bubble in SaaS and that the training is usually pretty good. Most, especially larger software companies have enablement department. There's a whole teams of people that are just in charge of, providing enablement and support to salespeople. And it's crazy to me that you would be expected to cold call people that are 15, 20 years into their career, and they don't supply you with any information outside of here's how to pitch basically our stuff. It's crazy. So what advice do you have for someone, because there's probably people listening to this podcast in a similar position that aren't really given a lot of direction. What advice do you have for someone like that?
Yeah, I think because I was kind of thrown into the deep end with the sharks, I had to learn on my own. And so the number one thing that I can tell everyone listening is to own your own personal development. You don't rely on what's available or what may not be available to you in your current role, because there is so much information out there and really, really good information like the Outbound Squad to help you develop these critical skills that will have a massive impact. And so the two things that I did was I owned my own personal development and I invested in myself because I wanted it bad enough. And I realized that was what it was going to take to be successful. And I think that goes back to what my dad told me early on is like, you had this innate ability to just figure things out. And I think that's such a critical skill as a sales professional, whether you're closing, whether you're prospecting. You need to be able to problem solve and think on your feet and be nimble and go out and really figure things out on your own sometimes. And so owning that personal development, investing in yourself, and putting the work in as it relates to those two categories for sure.
Yeah. I love that. I was fortunate as a rep, we had a lot of great training, but I remember, to buy the books, go to the seminars. That was kind of the thing back when I was learning how to sell in, the late, 2008, I guess, 2007, 2008. They didn't have a lot of podcasts really. It was back, I don't know how old you are, Anthony, but that was back when you had to actually plug your phone into the computer to get a podcast
Yeah.
onto your iPhone.
Yeah.
And most of them were really shitty. They weren't great. I love that though. Invest in yourself. I think it's a really good reminder for anyone. Part of how you allocate your personal budget every month, a small portion of that should be dedicated as much as you can into investing in yourself, especially when you're young. So as an SDR, did they lay out? Was the plan really clear for what it would take to become an AE? Or was there kind of some unknowns there? What was that? Because I hear different things from all kinds of different companies, and every company seems to have a promise of do this for 12 months and you'll become an AE. And in practice, I rarely see it work like that.
Yeah. So I think shifting gears away from that first company, because that was, I think, an outlier. They're really just like a mortgage finance company where there wasn't like a lot. I was like the only guy to be able to get promoted, and they just moved me in that role. But when I went to Demand Base, in my interview, I made it very clear like what I wanted. And they knew I had the 3 years of professional experience where I was, prospecting, calling. And I made it very clear of what my intentions were of like, I want to get promoted to AE ASAP, but I also want to make a name for myself first as a sales development rep to do things the right way, to prove myself, to earn that spot. And I was really lucky that there was a specific, they called it a bridge program, where SDRs could get promoted to different roles like a solutions consultant or an AE. And, I did really well in that role. And part of this was building my internal brand. I became really close with the VP of mid-market sales because I was crushing it for my two AEs. We had they gave me the best, mid-market patch in SF. And I took advantage of that and set up my AEs for success. And so they talked about me to the VP of mid-market sales. 6 months into the role, an AE opportunity opened up. And mind you, I'm the new kid on the block on the team. So I'm coming in super hot, crushing it. Everyone's looking at me like, who's this new guy that people have been there for a year and a half. And the mid-market VP wanted me to get promoted after 6 months. But obviously, there were some internal politics where that just like wasn't possible. And so I had to wait another 3 months, but there was a clear path. But I've heard horror stories where SDRs, there's no clear path, or they tell you something and the reality is another thing, and you have to wait a year and a half. So for me, I was really grateful to have a great enablement team that set up this bridge program where they trained you and got you ready for what they called like a panel and an interview to go through that process to see if you were ready to get promoted. But, I'm sure you've heard stories too. People don't have that fortune to have that clear-cut plan of what's next. But any advice I do have for people listening is if you're interviewing for a new role, ask about that. What is the plan? What is your program? And if they don't have a good answer, then maybe that's something to consider if a promotion is important to you. So,
yeah. I want to double click on personal brand, internal personal brand, because you've mentioned that a couple times. It sounds like a big part of this, and this might feel like common sense to some of the folks listening, but a big part of this is you were also in a position where, hey, I'm the top SDR on my team. You know what I mean? Like if anyone's going to be considered for this, it's going to be the people that are performing, and it's be so good that they can't ignore you, kind of thing.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you think about your internal brand at the companies that you work for?
Absolutely. And the reality is there's going to be a lot of people that hit their quota on the team. And so it's good to be the top SDR that's definitely hitting their numbers. But when you look at two people on paper, and you both are hitting your quota, it's like, what else can you do to stand out, to be that
Yeah.
gal or guy that's ready for the promotion, that's going to be the obvious choice. And so some of the things that I did as an SDR from day one, I was sharing like emails that maybe have worked for me in the past, or like call scripts, sharing in Slack. I would be the first person to raise my hand in team meetings to volunteer or to share. When my VP asked for something, I would be the first one. I remember 3 months into my role, I spoke at a company all hands in front of 500 people. I was super nervous and uncomfortable, but I knew by doing that, everyone was going to
Yeah.
know me. And I got kudos from the CRO and the CEO afterwards. And maybe I sounded like crap on the mic, but at least I got up there and did it. And that's what people remember, right? So when it came time for promotion, they wanted me because I was the guy that was doing all the other stuff that you can't teach. You can't teach someone
Yeah.
to care and to own that passion that you have to succeed. And so that's like one of my North Stars whenever, I've joined a new company. It's like, how am I going to put my name on the map to remember, to make sure that people know this is Anthony, this is what he's about. I did that at Outreach where when I joined there as an AE after I left Demand Base, I met with like before I even joined, I DM'd, Mark Costigo, the VP of sales. And I said, hey, I'm joining in 3 weeks. This is why I'm excited. This is what I plan on bringing to the table. And I found out that he took that to my manager and told me, he's like, I could tell this guy's going to be, a good asset on the team. So just doing those little things, that it's the little things that make the biggest impact, so that when someone thinks of an opportunity, you're top of mind. There's a lot of other ways that you can do it, but just do the little things that other people aren't willing to do, because that's what it takes to really excel and accelerate in your career.
Yeah. Likability is such a huge factor in just everything in your career, whether that's how you sell or promotion opportunities. When I think back to my time as a sales leader, some of the top performers are not necessarily people that we wanted to promote because they weren't great for the culture. It wouldn't be great to have someone like that in a leadership position. And they're just kind of a pain in the ass to work with.
Yeah.
Versus, like I said, it's not like you can only be one or the other. You can be both. But the people that really embody the culture, the people that really step up, like you said, this is such a simple thing, but sharing what is working for you, being like a team player, dude. There's so many people that are resistant to sharing what's working for them, and in fear that it will help other people, and all this other stuff. And there's a reason why I'm a big Michael Jordan fan. There's a reason why throughout his career he would set up these like summer league type of games where he would invite his competition to come play. And it's like, yeah, that helps them because they get to learn about MJ, but he's also learning about them. Like, if they're better, it's going to make him better. And there's this abundance mindset, around stuff. And I don't know, I think that's really, really great what you shared there. It's, again, you use the word obvious. That's where that comes to mind for me too. It's like, make yourself the obvious choice. I don't want to be that top performer that's hard to work with.
Yep.
Don't want to do that, Okay, so if we kind of shift gears a bit, becoming an AE, what was your first AE job like in the first 2 or 3 months? What, I guess, similar question to the SDR. What didn't come naturally to you in those first few months?
Yeah, it felt like oh shit moment in a way, because you don't know what you don't know until you know it and experience it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you can get a lot of the training prior to being in the role, but there's no better teacher than experience itself. So, I think what I struggled with initially was doing really good discovery and not making it about how cool our product was and how you can click this button to do this. I had to really shift my mindset to say, okay, we're here to just see if we're a fit or not. But for me, I was so excited in the beginning. I was like, oh, every company that we talk to, it's gonna be a home run, right? Happy years galore. I didn't have uh, that natural curiosity, and not in a way being like a pessimist, but objectively, you're supposed to really understand, how is this deal not going to happen, and you should be DQing early. And so, like,
Yeah.
in the beginning, I didn't understand the importance of true discovery and the goal of really finding out, is this even worth the prospect's time? Is it worth our time? And so I think I led with a very seller centric mindset, making it all about me and what I wanted. And I think it goes back to that abundant mindset, because we'll probably get into this, but until about a few years ago, I viewed my self-worth purely based on my performance in the role. And so
Mhm.
when I didn't have that early success, when I first started as an AE, I started to come off like very needy, and like, I need these deals to prove like that I can do this. And so like that piece didn't come naturally to me until I had to, hit my head against the wall a number of times to realize, like, hey, this approach is just not working. People don't like working with needy sales reps that are having this commission breath, that only care about what they have to offer. I've got to try to do things a different way. And so I think because I had never done the role before and I never experienced it, I didn't really understand what it meant to have that buyer centric mindset going into calls, and making sure I understood what the other person on the person on the other line really cared about, and if we could even help or not. It was all about me,
Yeah.
all about Anthony.
Yeah. Let's dig into that. It's something we talked about in preparing for this conversation. You said my self-worth was basically tied to your sales performance. Tell us a little bit more about that and kind of the journey that you went through.
Yeah, so I think it stemmed from a young age, of this lack of self worth for some reason, and everything that I was a part of externally drove my internal reality. And so,
Mhm.
for example, like, I needed to be the most outspoken. I needed to have all the friends. I needed to, be the class clown to get validation from others to feel like I was good enough. And I think that's why
Yeah.
I clinged on to sales so early on, is because what better way to feed your ego than to crush it in your role. But that comes when you have that view, that vantage point of your external world driving your internal world. It's a very scary place and dark place to be if you're not doing well. And so, whether it was in my relationships, my work, my finances, I felt like I had to prove externally that I was good enough to make myself feel good enough internally, rather than being confident and owning who I was. I was externally dependent. And so, that hurt me for a while when I became an AE, because in the first few months when I was ramping, it was the first time I didn't really do well. And so I went down this spiral
Yeah.
of like self doubt and negativity and self sabotaging. And I looked to other sources to feed that self worth, whether it was partying, whether it was gambling. And it brought me down a really dark hole. And I basically had to hit rock bottom to realize that I cannot think or live like this anymore, because it's just not sustainable. Like, I can't continue. It became like so stressful that I was having panic attacks about, not getting invited out by friends, or, relationships with women in my life or my family. I was just like creating these crazy stories and narratives in my head that I wasn't good enough. And if something happened, I took it personally. And if I didn't do well in my role, I was like, I'm going to get fired, and creating these crazy stories in my head. And so I got to a point where I needed to make a change. And, I'll pause there because I think that's kind of a lot to unpack as like the back
Yeah.
half of what my career was like. And, obviously I did the 180 in the last 3 years, but it was tough for a while.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing all that, man. When you're used to being a top performer, I went through something very similar as a first year sales manager, and you don't do well, it fucks with your head, man.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? You're so used to doing well and for things always working out because you put in the work that when they don't, it just there's this loss of like a sense of feeling out of control.
Yep.
Like I don't have control over the things in my life. And a quote that reminded me of is a guy, Michael Port. He always says, business problems are really personal problems in disguise. And what you just outlined around abundance, it sounds really simple to say, oh, you need to have an abundance mindset. But what I'm hearing from you is that because you didn't really have this in your personal life, it just bled into like how you sold and how you operated in your career. Do you look
Yeah.
at business and personal? Do you look at those two things being very connected?
I
Yeah.
really do. I really do, man.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that because everyone says detach from the outcome, but we don't realize that like there's certain things that happen in our life that affect how we show up at
Yeah.
work, in our personal life. People have trauma at a very young age that seeps into their subconscious. For me, that was not having my biological dad around, and from a very young age, I always thought like, why am I not good enough? And that carried on as I got older, and
Yeah.
that feeling of lack of self-worth drove how I showed up with people, and it ruined relationships. It ruined my reputation with people because I was so insecure that I never thought enough was good enough, right? So I was always chasing,
Yeah.
and that affected how I showed up as sales professional. But when you can finally start taking care of yourself and letting your core values and your integrity drive your external, knowing that regardless of what happens, I'm still going to be okay because I've got gratitude and I got perspective and I have these core values that I believe in and my actions are in alignment with that. That's when things change. But until that happens, it's really hard to detach from the outcome, right? So it's
Yeah.
not just detaching from your quota. It's like you got to take care of yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup. You've got to do the work. You've got to get clear on what are your core values, what are your integrity, and your actions need to be in alignment with that. And it took me 3 years, and it took me hitting rock bottom to do that. And so that was one of the reasons I started posting on LinkedIn in the first place. It's like I want to help people realize that you don't have to hit rock bottom to get to that point where
Yeah.
you can start honoring that trauma that you went through, and you can start healing it, and you can start taking the steps that are necessary to start to use those flaws, if you will, as your superpowers to own who you are and be confident in who you are, and let that drive how you show up, and just not apologize to be who you are.
Yeah. No, I love that message, man. I think the lesson there is if you have personal stuff like that in your life, like it really pays to figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, I know we're both big proponents of therapy. I've been going to therapy, I think, for almost 4 years now, and it's one of the best investments. I mean, most people's insurance covers it now too. I mean, I get to see a
Yep.
therapist for $20 a session or whatever the copay is. You know what I mean? It feels like an absolute steal. But if you have stuff in your personal life, I guarantee most of that is going to spill over into your professional life. And this is the stuff that no tactic or strategy will help you overcome being too desperate or needy in a sales situation. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Most of us are not great actors. So it's kind of hard to hide, what if our
So true.
intentions are. And I don't know about you. I don't want to have to hide my intentions. I don't,
Yeah.
that sounds stressful to me.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's a shitty feeling too to close your laptop and realize that you got, that stuff to figure out. And so, just last thought on this is the practical steps are to become aware of a certain area of your life that is not up to standard. For me, I realized I had a gambling addiction. So I had to accept that about myself. So I had to become aware, accept it. And once I
Yeah.
accepted, I had to let go of the control that I could figure it out on my own. And then I needed to have the courage to ask for help. So it's awareness, acceptance, liberating from that, letting go, and then having the courage to ask for help. So that could be that framework can be applied to anything in your life that's not up to standard to fix. So if you need help at work, don't be ashamed of it. Accept that, hey, this is an area that I need to improve. And people appreciate and respect when you can own that. And you have courage. It
Yeah.
takes courage to ask for help. It takes courage to go to therapy. It takes courage to invest in yourself. It's not an easy thing to do. But once you start down that path, things start to change little by little, day by day.
Yeah. So that was awareness, acceptance, courage, you said?
Yeah, so it's awareness, acceptance, and then there's a phase of like letting go control that you think you can do it on your own, and then courage. And I learned that in my 12-step program from Gamblers Anonymous. I'm not saying everyone should go read the 12 steps, but the principles can be applied to anyone, and it's why it's such a powerful tool for addicts that overcome these crazy addictions. It's because it works.
Yeah. The letting go piece. I mean, you can even just apply this to someone just in their job as a sales rep with their manager. There's so many people that have so much shame around asking for help. And I relate because I kind of grew up in an old school kind of environment, where I feel like, be a man, take care of your shit, don't ask for help, like be a lone wolf, that kind of stuff doesn't serve us. Let's shift gears into being an AE. One of the things that you do extremely well is, and it's a huge trend right now, just in SaaS, which I'm super grateful of. It keeps me busy, obviously with work, but it also, I think, allows reps to feel more in control of their destiny, and that's self-sourcing their pipe. Doing outbound, being able to, balance as an account executive my sales pipeline and doing outbound and filling the top of the funnel. So one of the things that was a big initiative at Outreach when you work there was 30% of our pipeline we're going to self-source. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and kind of how you contributed to that and how you think about self-sourcing your pipeline as an account executive?
Yeah, 100%. I've been blessed enough to be in roles where prospecting never went away. So like I had to keep doing it. It was just a thing. And so, and because I was successful as an SDR, it was always been my strongest skill. And so that's why I love talking about it. And so thanks for bringing it up. But yeah, at Outreach, we had this initiative where, in order to scale, you have to start having some pipeline coming from AEs. And so we had to develop a way to make AEs want to prospect, but also make it sustainable because we're all very busy. And so we developed this method called 2100s. I'm not responsible for it. One of my old VPs comes from Salesforce, was responsible for it. And he basically said, every week you select 2 new accounts and you sequence 10 new people total. And at the end of the week, you have 0 overdue tasks. So 2 new accounts, 10 people, 0 overdue tasks at the end of the week. And I took that to a different, I took that in stride and made it my own, where I started focusing on 5 accounts per week because I had the bandwidth to do so. The 2100 was just a North Star to hold us accountable. So I think number one is you have to have a set goal as a framework to hold yourself accountable. And then you need to break down every single day, how are you going to execute the controllable inputs? And so my time blocking is very niche. So I took the 2100s and turned into like, okay, how am I going to operationalize this for me? And so like I niched down my time blocking. And so I would say on, Tuesday from 9 to 10, that's when I'm going to literally go in and put people in a sequence and outreach. And then from 11 to 10, I'm going to execute my call tasks. So there are very specific very specific blocks of tasks. And so what that allowed me to do is 2 things. Not every day looked the same. And so at the end of a Monday, I would look at my calendar on Tuesday and I would say, okay, these are the meetings I have. Here are going to be my prospecting blocks around those calls. And so I didn't make an excuse that I have all these calls. I found the time, the white space of my calendar, and then I had to practice discipline to actually execute on those tasks every week or every day. And ultimately what ends up happening is if you focus on the controllable inputs every day, if you actually make your calls during the call block, and if you actually sequence 5 new people a day or whatever your North Star metric is that's controllable, the results will end up taking care of themselves. And so by following that framework and that system, the meetings started to roll in is because I was focusing on the things that were in my control. And so, I would select 5 new accounts per week. I would use, Sales Nav to find the people that I was going to sequence. I then developed very specific, relevant persona messaging that I would deliver to them. I was using a lot of touches early on in my sequences. So I would do like 3 touches on day 1, 3 touches on day 3. But because I was using different channels on those touches and there was relevant messaging, it decreased the time it took for me to get a response because I was doing it earlier in the sequence. So that's kind of a little bit about kind of the initiative, how I operationalized it, and then how I actually went and executed it. But the net here is for AEs listening, there's no excuse not to prospect. You have to, you can't rely only on your SDR. You have to own your pipeline. And the way to do that is to get very specific on your goals, not only for the week, the month, the quarter, but daily micro actions that will get you to those end goals. And so, I was able to generate like over $1 million in pipeline as I was ramping, and that led to 5 new logos closed in the year, all because I focused on the daily actions and owned my pipeline gen.
Yeah, I love this, dude. So you're essentially doing a 5x5.
Yeah,
is what I've heard a lot of people call it. Yeah, 5 accounts, 5 prospects each, and then your goal each day would be to sequence 5 new people.
Yep.
So 1 new account's worth of sequences I'm going to start each day, and then I'm going to have the follow-ups and that sort of stuff. How many hours a day would you say that you blocked off for outbound?
Yeah, so it definitely differed per day. So there would be some days like on like Tuesday, I may have like 3 demos and 2 disco calls where I can only do like an hour a day, but I would still make the time, like I think a lot of people show up every day and they kind of wing it. And so the night before I look at my calendar, and if it's an hour I have to block, how can I use that hour most effectively? What is the number one task that I can do during that hour? So for me, it was like executing my calls and my emails because I want to increase my surface area to increase the likelihood that I get a response. So I'll use that hour to my advantage. Then 4 p.m. rolls around on Tuesday. I see I don't have a lot of calls. So what maybe more admin type prospecting activities like research or actually sequencing can I do on Wednesday, right? So I think for AEs, because you have another aspect of revenue generating activities, which is moving pipeline forward, you have to find the days where you can batch your tasks, and the days that you don't have a lot of time. What are the activities that are those $1,000 type activities that you can take advantage of for the limited time that you do have?
Which is going to be picking up the phone probably for most people, I would imagine.
100%. Picking up the phone,
yep.
And then sending that follow-up email.
Yeah. So realistically, correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking probably 5 to 10 hours of someone's week, depending on how busy they are.
Yep, I think that's
prospect.
Yep, I think that's definitely in line with and it's in line with what I'm even doing now at Lattice. And it's interesting because they also have an initiative for AE outbound. So I've been able to come in. That's been part of building my internal personal brand. I told that story about how we did the same thing at Outreach, and I'm kind of helping lead the charge of, building that AE outbound muscle for the upmarket team. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the time's there, right? Like I replace scrolling Instagram and doing random stuff and scrolling LinkedIn with, just go make some calls instead. It's there. You just have to have the discipline. If it's on your calendar, it's like you wouldn't not show up to a VP meeting if it's on your calendar. So why would you ignore, the very specific prospecting block on your calendar,
Yeah. In a way, this is a lesson I learned. One of my I was one of the partners at the company I used to work for. The way that he explained that was, you're showing more dignity and respect towards someone that you don't even know than towards yourself. Like the most
Yeah,
important appointments to follow through with are the ones that you make with yourself. Like
100%.
you're the most
It's
important person. You mentioned not being able to pour from an empty cup. It's like, dude, you got to fill your cup up first so that you can show up for other people.
Yeah, I literally have a block on my calendar that says lunch and then get outside. And it's like
Hmm.
I'm very specific with how I spend my time, and I'm specific, but I'm also very intentional, because
Yeah.
I know if I do the right things every single day, when I close my laptop for the day, I feel so much better. I feel in control. And it goes back to what we said earlier.
Yeah.
It's own your personal development. Be intentional. Focus on the things you can control and, let go of the things that you can't. And I think, we lose sight of that as sales professionals because we're so focused on hitting quota. We forget about like the micro actions that it takes to get there.
Yeah. I want to talk to you and sort of end on mental health.
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago, it doesn't happen often, but I had this, like, I had to take time away from work and reschedule some meetings, all this other stuff, because I was feeling really anxious. And it wasn't even about anything in particular. I just realized I had too many plates spinning. I just started Ethan. He's my first full-time person, at the company. I'm trying to get a book out. There's all this other kind of shit that we're doing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I had to really step away. And what it made me do is really prioritize a couple things where, hey, when I get up at 5 in the morning, I'm not going straight to work. The first hour of the day, I need to spend getting a quick workout in, looking after my mental health and taking care of myself. And I don't know what, for me, that was a good enough why. I just never want to feel that again. So there's stuff that I try to work in. One of those is an hour break in the middle of the day. And I'm just kind of curious for you, because you mentioned one already, getting outside. What are some of the stuff that you do on a daily, weekly basis, rituals, things like that you do to sort of look after your mental health and take care of yourself?
Yeah. Really appreciate the question. Something you said that stood out to me was never wanting to feel that way again. That
Yeah.
is like my North Star and my why, and that goes into what I'll say next is I do a daily gratitude practice where every day I try to do in the morning, but if not, like I'll do it throughout the day where I just like take a seat, write down 3 things I'm grateful for. Like this morning, what did I write? I have it somewhere here. I wrote down spending quality time with my family and dog because I'm at my family's house right now, house sitting, the hot sun, access to water, food, and fruit, and a steady paycheck. And like those things, I could be thinking like the worst things, but if I write those things down, you realize how lucky we are. And there's so many people that are struggling way worse than us, and it's like it really puts things in perspective. So I like to start with
Yeah.
gratitude, some form of movement, whether that's like some stretching, meditation. I love my Peloton. I think being intentional with making sure you speak to your loved ones, whether it's family or friends, getting outside, listening to daily affirmations, speaking daily affirmations, whatever you need to do to get yourself in alignment with like your core values and your integrity to start the day, to remind yourself of the present, to
Yeah.
eliminate thoughts about the past, to eliminate thoughts about the future. Like that's my goal. Is like how can I get grounded and present into the now? So like this morning, I know I have a big call coming up with a C-level executive. I needed to do things this morning to ground myself so like my mind wasn't racing about that call all day. Right. So it's all about just like doing the things that make you feel fulfilled and full. and full of joy in the morning before you go right to work. And then make sure at the end of the day too, you reflect, right? Oftentimes, like, we make a bunch of calls, we send a bunch of emails, but we don't monitor our progress. Like, even if you don't book a meeting, write down like, hey, I actually executed during my call block today. Like, that's a win. Most people ignore the call block and they're just like, yeah, put it off to tomorrow. So celebrate the small wins, honor progress instead of striving for perfection, and really tap into gratitude. Those are the big ones for me.
I love it, dude. Honor progress. That's a really good one.
There's peace in the
we're
progress.
about out of time. Yeah, absolutely. We're about out of time. I got a couple rapid fire questions for you. All right.
Let's do it.
So the first one, I just asked this for fun. You don't have to actually choose, of course, but it's kind of cool to hear what people say. If you had to choose between phone, email, and social, for outbound, what do you pick and why?
Phone, it's the quickest way to get information and to book a meeting.
Yep. What is something you believe about sales that most would disagree with?
That you don't have to, you can work less and have better results.
That's an interesting one. We could record a whole podcast on that.
Yeah.
And lastly, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to yourself as a rookie salesperson?
Give yourself grace and make sure you're taking care of yourself outside of work. Those are the two, because it's very hard and easy. It's very hard to be a new sales professional, SDR, BDR, AE, and get wrapped up in the performance and tying your worth as a person to that performance or lack thereof. So make sure you don't lose sight of what's important to you outside of work, whether it be hobbies, family, traveling, food, whatever it is. Make sure you're filling your cup first, so you can show up abundantly with your manager, with your prospects, with your teammates. So that's what I'd say to that.
Love it, man. This has been great. Where can people go to connect with you? You post a lot of great content on LinkedIn. You have a newsletter. You do a little bit of coaching on the side. Where can people go to connect with you and learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah, shoot me a note on LinkedIn. I try to post content that's just based on my experience and talk about mental health. And I have that newsletter that goes out once a week, which is like one quick actionable tip that I've learned along the way. But yeah, go to my LinkedIn, bunch of resources there. And I'd love to answer any questions that I can. So shoot me a DM if you want.
Yep. And that's Anthony Natoli. Make sure to check him out on LinkedIn. Subscribe to the podcast if you're not. Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Leave us a rating, all that good stuff. And Anthony, it's great having you on.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it, man.